Welcome to Viva la Máquina. This is Juan. Everybody has a hero, somebody to look up to. What would you ask your hero if you have a chance? My chance came when Big Daddy Don Garlits offered a private tour of his museum. Knowing that his hearing is gone, I respectfully emailed my request the night before. What about moving a ton of bricks when you were 2 years old? What about your time in the military? Scoutish thrifty, investing without debt. And how do you stay so healthy at 92? So stay around.
Donald moving the ton of bricks. Now, because this is a big group and it's not just run by the one guy, does anybody want to hear that story?
Yes. Yeah, I haven't heard
Okay. It's 1934, about March. I'm 2 years and 2 months old. My dad, the house burned down that we were living in, and my dad has built another small house, and he's going to put a fireplace on it for heat. That was very common in those days. And we were poor people. They were tearing some buildings down in Tampa, and he bought a dump truck load of used bricks. And the dump truck brought them out to the property, and my mom met the dump truck guy, and she wanted them brought over where the fireplace was going to be. But there'd been some rain, and the dump truck guy was afraid to leave the hard pan. It wasn't paved, but it was hard. And he was afraid to come into the yard and get stuck because it would cost at least $5 to get towed out, and probably only like $3 to get the bricks brought out there. So the guy didn't pay no attention to my mother. She was young, 20 years old, you know, and women had virtually no say-so in anything in those days. It was incredible. And they just dumped the bricks in the road, which was about, not quite the length of, about half the length of this building from where my dad wanted them. So my dad come home that night, saw the bricks out in the street, and flew into a rage, had a really short temper. And he says to my mother, "I can never depend on you to do anything right." And she's pleading with him. "Bill, I tried to get him to bring him up in the yard, but he wouldn't do it." "Oh," he said, "you just weren't firm enough with him." And then all of a sudden he went quiet. And when my dad went quiet, that meant he was thinking. Now, he had been an engineer for Westinghouse, and he was on the team that invented the electric iron and the electric fan. And he was real smart, especially with numbers. So he says to me, "Go get your little red wagon and meet me at the pile of bricks." So I run, get my little red wagon, and I meet him at the pile of bricks. He reaches in his vest, always had a vest, looked at his pocket watch, put the watch back in his vest, and he gets 5 bricks, not real fast, just kind of slowly, puts 5 bricks in the wagon, walks at a normal speed over to where he wants them, stacks them up real neat, comes back through the wagon to the bricks, gets his pocket watch out, and he looks at his pocket watch to see how long that took. Puts his watch back in his pocket. Had a slide rule, always kept a slide rule. Took his slide rule, he's looking at it, he's doing this with it thing. He says, "By now my mother's out there, and she's screaming, 'The baby can't move the bricks.'" And I didn't like that because the baby was my little brother, which was still nursing. I was not a baby. I never considered myself a baby. I always thought I was a big boy because I happened to be at the birthing when my mother had that baby, and I knew all about babies, and I certainly wasn't one of them. So anyway, that was a whole thing. That's a story all in itself. So anyway, my father never paid no attention to him. He just kept looking with his slide rule. And he finally said, "If the boy starts moving the bricks when I drive out of here in the morning at daylight, and stops moving the bricks when I come home at dusk, he can move these bricks in 7 days." And my mother said, "The baby can't move the bricks." And I was already, in my mind, I knew my father was going to win the argument because she never won any arguments with him. I was already thinking about I was going to build me a road and all to do it, you know. I moved those bricks in 5 days because number one, I put more than 5 bricks in the wagon, and I went faster than my dad went. And my dad got me, we were, like I said, we were poor people, but he delivered vegetables in the real fancy section of town, Hyde Park. And the people put stuff out by the street for the poor people to come by and get, instead of, you know, taking them to a rummage sale or something. And he would always see all kinds of fancy stuff. He got me the nicest wagon you ever imagined. It had a couple little marks on it, you know, but hell, I was going to put some marks on it myself. But it was one of those wooden ones with the high rails on the side. And I wore the little one completely out. One of the wheels came off of it, in fact, toward the end. But I didn't care. I just kept dragging those bricks over there. And that was the story of my life. Like the guy at the Stroker, he said, "You'll never beat the Californian. You'll never get a rear engine car to go straight. It's been tried 100 times. What makes you think you can do it? You'll never go 270 miles an hour. You'll never go 250 miles an hour. You'll never go 200 miles an hour." I mean, I've heard it all my life. And the minute they tell me you can't do it, it's just something clicks in my mind, and it just sets me free. Also, he said, "You're a master sergeant in the artillery. It takes a long time to become a master sergeant." That's true. I was 9 years in the artillery, but I was real smart with numbers and all. And I was chief of the firing battery, and I had to be able to do numbers because I had 6 howitzers that I had to deal with, and I had elevations and directions east, left and right. And the last 2 years I was a master sergeant of the 9-year hitch. But it did start to become interfering with the drag racing. Or I should say the drag racing interfered with the artillery. And they gave me a discharge. It was in the National Guard. And I got a business deferment discharge. But I was exciting. And of course, that had a lot to do with my hearing problem because we had no ear protection whatsoever. And we would fire 18 rounds when we'd fire for effect. And that's 18 times each. The 6 guns would fire 3 times each, and that did a lot of damage. And then he said something about the scouts is thrifty. Well, I didn't really learn to be thrifty from the scouts. When I was 6 years old, like I told you, we were poor people, but the neighbors next door were pretty wealthy. The man worked for Tampa Tribune. He ran the printing department. He was in charge of all the printing presses, and he was well-heeled. And they had a real nice horse and a stable. And one day he said to me, "Donnie," he said, "if you go down there and clean that stable out and put all that nasty straw out there in that pile, put fresh straw in there, I'll give you a dime." And so, a dime, that's a lot of money in 1938. It took about an hour and a half to do it. I had this shiny dime, and I run back over to the shop. My dad was in there, I'll never forget. He had a steel plate about that thick, big square, and he was straightening nails. And he'd have these jars with what the size of the nail was. And he straightened the nail. He never threw one nail away, straightened every nail and used it again. He was straightening these nails. I said, "I just earned a dime over at Mr. Eister's. I cleaned out the horse stable." He said, "Give me that dime." Took the dime, he laid it on the counter. He reached in his nail pouch. He got 5 pennies and a nickel. He laid it on the little metal thing. And he took one of the pennies, he pushed it aside. He said, "That's 10% of a dime." He said, "Now you take the 9 pennies, the 9 cents, and you do whatever you want to with it." Then he got a mason jar with a metal lid, and he cut a little slot in the top. And he put the penny in the slot. He said, "That's the start of your savings." He says, "You need to save 10% of all the money that you touch. And if you do that, you'll be a millionaire when you get old, because Social Security will never take care of you." And that was
Amen.
the start of my savings.
6 years
And
old.
that's 1938. We fast forward to 1942. My mom, and she divorced my father because he was a tyrant, no question about it. But it taught me a lot of things. And she had this new younger husband, which was more liberal. And they had a dairy, and they needed more cows. And the guy up in Georgia had 25 cows, and we could get them for $2,500. You want $100 a piece. They needed $500 down, and they were going to pay for the cows on time. And they only had a couple $100. They didn't have quite 500. And I had my jar. It was a bigger jar by now. It had turned into one of those pickle jars like on a bar. You've seen them.
Yeah.
And that thing was about half full of money. And we dumped it out. There was $300 in that jar. And I loaned that to my mom and my stepdad, and they got the cows. And it's amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it.
Yeah.
But that's where the thrifty came from. I mean, I've always been that way. Like I said, we never bought anything on time, and always saved. I even saved today, and I know what I'm saving it for. I don't need it. Well, my truck is a 2001, but I like it. You know, I don't think there's any reason to get something new just for the sake of getting something new. If you like what you got, why don't you just keep it? You know, and we put a Hemi engine in that truck, and it's fast. I mean, and it's me, you know. Oh, and he said, "You're the healthiest 92-year-old I know. Any tips? Any tips?" Well, it's not really a tip. It's a lifestyle. I never drank. I never smoked. My father was a health nut. He believed in eating raw vegetables and not too much meat, and stay away from white sugar and white flour. In fact, on his envelope, he said, "The whiter your bread, the sooner you're dead." It was stamped right on his envelope. And this was way before any of this was fashionable. And get lots of exercise. That's important. And you must exercise your mind as well as you exercise your body. And sitting in front of a television set is numbing your mind. You know, I can sit in front of a television set and I can go right to sleep. But I can lay down in the bed and I can't go to sleep because I'm thinking about stuff I want to do. And I just recently wrote the script for my movie. It took me about 3 months, and they like it. The movie company says it's a very good script. And I got that Screenwriters for Dummies about that thick. I got the program for my computer. I did that. I wrote the book, Don and His Cards. I did all that on my computer. So I keep my mind working constantly, just as well as I try to do my body. In fact, I think my mind's in better shape than my body is. Because I got some knees that's giving some trouble. That's why it's hard to lift the legs. But I am not complaining. I'm so happy to be here. And I do enjoy this so much, with visiting with all you folks and telling these stories. All right, folks.
That story did it got something.